Hello everyone, I thought I'd do something slightly different for a change. No idea how well this is going to come out, but knowing me, it's going to be a proper hack job. But let's get into it. Ages ago I said when I hit 360 subscribers, I was going to do an Xbox 360 special video. If you're new here and don't know why this would be significant to my channel, it's because I started out as an Xbox 360 collector, and to this day I still am over on Instagram. Originally I just wanted to document my journey to complete a worldwide Xbox 360 set, but this journey's fallen a bit to the wayside. I really should get back to picking some new bits up, to be honest with you. The journey dried up a bit because, for me, all the physical stores around me just closed, and it's not that much fun to go online and buy everything, and I don't really get to go to many boot sales, and all the charity shops are just way overpriced now. There's only a single CEX near me, and to be honest, it never has the best selection, which makes going to the same one every time for a hunt just not that fun. I was never solely an Xbox 360 collector though. I did collect pretty much everything at the same time, but I thought I'd just start showing off different aspects of my collection on here, and that's why I changed the name. But anyway, here is the video I promised focusing solely on the Xbox 360. I thought I would try to do something in one of those iceberg formats. The ones you usually see on like lost media or paranormal content here on YouTube. I thought it'd just be a different way to go into a bit more depth of, well, my knowledge of collecting for the 360, because I like to think I know a little bit about it. There probably is an existing iceberg for the Xbox 360 collecting scene, but that's not mine, is it? I thought I'd just make one myself. Bit of fun, innit? If you don't know how this works, basically it's broken down into tiers, with each tier getting more obscure as the video progresses. This is in no way a complete list. There's enough games for me to create 2 or 3 more of these, but I wanted to highlight a generalisation of how I would view each section of the iceberg. I will say though, being from England, any prices I mention will be representative of here in the UK. I will only touch on the prices from overseas when mentioning imports. Although the prices of these games will be different, their availability is pretty much similar around the world, give or take a few which for some reason become really rare in other places, but not here. And overall I just hope you find some games that you didn't know existed. Strap yourself in though, this is going to be a long video. Timestamps are included below in the description if you want to jump to each tier. So let's get going. Tier 1 is what I'm going to class as the casual player / beginner collector tier. This is where we'll talk about games that everyone knows about and ones that are easy to obtain for your collection. There's only a handful of games I could choose to kick this off, and it had to be Microsoft's flagship series, didn't it? Halo. Halo is a sci-fi first-person shooter series which debuted on the original Xbox back in 2001. There's a plethora of Halo games released on the Xbox 360. This includes 5 first-person games, 1 real-time strategy game, and 1 top-down twin-stick shooter. The first-person shooters include Halo 3, Halo 3 ODST, Halo Reach, Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, this is a remaster of the original game, and Halo 4. All of these are very easy to come by and will cost you very little for the system. Here in the UK you shouldn't have much trouble picking up this entire set for no more than a couple of pounds each, if that. They were also all re-released on the newer Xbox consoles in the Halo Master Chief Collection, so this is probably going to keep the price down. The real-time strategy game is known as Halo Wars. It was specifically designed to be played on a console unlike other RTS games. These are usually just slapped together PC ports and don't fare well in the transition. But to be honest, this one's pretty fun in the genre. Again, it will set you back peanuts here in the UK. Just because I mentioned the twin-stick shooter game, Halo Spartan Assault, I will add this into here, but it was never released physically and has since been removed from the store. There is an Xbox One version available, and it is included in Game Pass. It's a fun little game though, but it does overstay its welcome. But from a collector's standpoint, you can ignore this one. Where else was I going to go from here, other than Gears of War, the other Xbox juggernaut of a franchise? Like Halo, there were multiple games released for the system. But unlike Halo, the 360 was where this franchise was born. It's a sci-fi third-person cover-based shooter, which is best known for its machine gun weapon, which doubles up as a chainsaw, called the Lancer. This is another series which is continuing to this day, and had multiple releases on newer systems. The 360, however, was home to 3 mainline titles, and 1 spin-off, these being Gears of War, Gears of War 2, surprisingly Gears of War 3, and Gears of War Judgment. All of these reviewed highly and garnered a massive fanbase, although Judgment came off as its weakest release. Again, like Halo, all of these games are readily available, and can be found at pretty much any game store still carrying 360. And the best thing is, they'll run you next to nothing at all. According to the CEX website, the most expensive in the series on the 360 is Judgment, and that's just sitting at £2 at the time of making this video. Even with the store shutting down, I can't see this one going any higher, since it's included in Xbox Game Pass. Still keeping it exclusive, but getting away from the shooter sci-fi settings, we have the Forza series. These are broken down into 2 types of game. There's the Forza Motorsport Sim Track Racer games, and the open world, more arcadey Forza Horizon games. The Motorsport series started back in the original Xbox with the release of the first game, but the 360 got Motorsport 2, 3 and 4. All of these games are solid track racers that rival the current, at the time, iteration of Sony's Gran Turismo offerings. To be honest, most of them surpassed them at the time. The games themselves are massive in the amounts of cars, tracks and events. 3 is especially known to contain a serious number of events. And if you're a fan of Top Gear when Clarkson, Hammond and May were in charge, numbers 3 and 4 will be right up your alley. The Horizon games, on the other hand, take a less serious approach. They drop you into a massive open world where you have to drive fast and pull off some insane showcase events at a car and music festival. There are 2 of these on the system, aptly named Horizon 1 and Horizon 2. The first game is a 360 exclusive, and it still looks and plays great to this day. The sequel, unfortunately, was developed at the same time as the Xbox One version, so the 360 port got the short end of the stick. It's still a fun game, but you're more walled into the roads, and large areas of off-road sections are cordoned off. The mainline Motorsport games, again, are very cheap. They max out at about £3 for Motorsport 4 on the CEX website. At the time of recording this is going to be out of date really quick, isn't it? Especially with this store going down, but they're still going to be lower end titles. The Horizon games, while not crazy priced at the moment, they will still set you back about £10 to £12 respectively. Even though there's more of a price hike for the Horizon games, they can still easily be found in plentiful numbers. When it comes to racers, you don't get much better than the Forza series on the Xbox, so pick these up if racing's your thing. Here we go, the first non-exclusive game for the system that is everywhere. And if you own the system, you most likely have one of these games already. Or if you don't, if you pick up a bundle, it's almost guaranteed there'll be one included. That's right, the Call of Duty franchise. Everyone knows what these are. First-person shooter war games. They're set from the World Wars all the way up to fictional future events. The system saw a staggering 11 physical releases. These were Call of Duty 2, 3, Modern Warfare 1, 2 and 3, World at War, Black Ops 1, 2 and 3, Ghosts, and Advanced Warfare. There was a digital release of the original game, but if I keep going into all these digital releases, we'll be here all day. All of these are your standard affair of a campaign and multiplayer mode, except Black Ops 3, which is multiplayer only on the Xbox 360 for some reason. Nailing a price down on what the games in this series will cost you is a bit difficult, as there's many different versions of the games, with multiples including extras, such as big box hardened editions and things, with night vision goggles and remote controlled cars. It goes a bit mad. But if you want just the vanilla, no special editions, no Game of the Year editions, the priciest game for the system is surprisingly Black Ops 2, which is sitting around £12 on CEX currently. Which is good, it's actually gone down in price. When I wrote this, it was £18. This is because it's been added to the backwards compatible list on the Xbox Series X, and the servers recently came back online. Again, it's an easy one still to track down at like boot sales and charity shops for pennies, so I wouldn't go out spending a lot of money on it. These games are literally everywhere. Next up on the list is a set of games that doesn't need an introduction. It's the Bethesda RPG games. You've most likely seen or played one of these before, but let's talk about them. These are the Elder Scrolls games, Oblivion and Skyrim, and the Fallout releases, 3 and New Vegas. Again, these are long-running series, and the 360 isn't their birthplace, and they definitely haven't stopped here either. They've been coming out on the Xbox One up to the Series X since. These are all massive single-player first-person RPG games, with the Elder Scrolls games being set in a fantasy setting, and the Fallout games taking more in a sci-fi post-nuclear war setting. It's hard to recommend just one of these games as they all have their fans for different reasons. Skyrim is easily the most well known, but it has been re-released on every platform under the sun. Fallout 3 is said to be the better of the 2 Fallout games, but there are plenty of people out there who would die on the hill for New Vegas. For me, personally, the only one I truly enjoyed was Oblivion, but each to their own. When it comes to the collecting side of these, I would strongly suggest aiming to pick up the Game of the Year editions, as they always contain all of the downloadable content, and as the 360 store is shutting down soon, these variations are probably going to shoot up in price. The base versions of the games are always really cheap, but the complete editions, especially the New Vegas ones, are climbing more towards the £20 mark and beyond. Fallout also recently had a TV show released, so that is bumping the prices up as well. On another quick collector's note, some of the expansions got their own releases on disc for the 360. These include the Shivering Isles for Oblivion, and 2 double packs for Fallout 3, one including Broken Steel and Point Lookout, and the other including Operation Anchorage and The Pit. The final DLC, Mothership Zeta, only got a code in a box treatment, and that only came out in the United States as a standalone release, and it now fetches some stupid money. All that for an expired code and a bit of plastic. Bit mad, innit? But don't worry, Mothership Zeta did actually come out physically on the Game of the Year edition, so if you want the full package and want that bit on a disc, that's the one to go for. Oblivion also had a strange release known as the 5th Anniversary Edition. From what I can tell, it only contains the same extra DLC as the Game of Year Edition, but it also comes with a third DVD which contains a making of or something. It comes in a strange grey case. It pops up from time to time. Up next is EA's answer to the Call of Duty franchise. And just by saying that, you'll be able to guess it's a first-person shooter series with a mostly military aesthetic. I say mostly, as this will be explained shortly. There was a number of releases in the franchise and the system. Battlefield 2, Modern Combat, Battlefield 3, and Battlefield 4 make up the more serious games in the series, while Battlefield Bad Company 1 and 2 take on a slightly more lighter tone. Think the tone of the film Jarhead. That's the best comparison I can think of. The final little spin-off was Battlefield Hardline. That was a cops and robbers reskin to the franchise, and it didn't exactly go down too well. The way these games wanted to set themselves apart from Call of Duty was an emphasis on destructible buildings and scenery. Oh, and massive online games. The multiplayer is played out on huge maps, with tanks, planes and other vehicles. These were the main selling points of the games, and the later games, the single player just felt tacked on. The servers for these are going offline soon, and to be honest, by the time I get this out, they probably already are offline. So if you're collecting these now, you won't get the complete experience. They're all very cheap though, still each costing about £1.50 in the UK. The earlier titles are definitely worth playing for the single player though. Time for a series without much filler. The 3 Batman Arkham games released on the 360 are Batman Arkham Asylum, Arkham City and Arkham Origins. These are all third-person action superhero games with a large focus on stealth and having the enemy be afraid of you, not the other way around. These all have a great story and are stuffed full of references to everything and everyone from Batman's extensive history. The first game takes place within the Arkham Asylum grounds and it has a more Metroidvania feel to it. You're free to move about wherever, but you'll find many paths that are blocked off, which you'll need to go and collect a specific upgrade to pass. This creates a lot of backtracking, but it's good fun. The other games do this, but they take a more of an open world approach, so it just didn't feel the same to me. The first 2 games were developed by Rocksteady Studios, and Origins by Warner Brothers themselves. There is a clearly noticeable downgrade in quality for Origins, but overall it isn't a bad game, and it is still worth your time. Again, these games are pretty affordable. The first 2, Asylum and City, will run you a couple of pounds, but Origins was recently delisted and it's crept up to £15 now, so you might want to grab it before the next hike. There are multiple versions like Game of the Year versions as well, and if you want to go for a complete subset of these, there's many released in different formats such as steelbooks with different characters on them, and yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, that one. These do pop up quite a bit though, and it's just a case of being in the right place at the right time to find the one you're missing. Overall, this is one of the better superhero video game franchises out there, and you'd be mad not to give these a go. Well, here it is, the LEGO games. It's a series you will see absolutely everywhere in your 360 collecting journey. If there was a popular franchise at the time, it probably got a LEGO game made of it. Let's prove this point by listing off the games. LEGO Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, LEGO Indiana Jones Original Adventures, LEGO Batman, LEGO Indiana Jones 2 The Adventure Continues, LEGO Harry Potter Years 1 to 4, LEGO Harry Potter Years 5 to 7, LEGO Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars, LEGO Pirates of the Caribbean, LEGO Batman 2 DC Superheroes, LEGO Lord of the Rings, LEGO Marvel Superheroes, LEGO Movie The Video Game, LEGO The Hobbit, LEGO Batman 3 Beyond Gotham, LEGO Jurassic World, LEGO Marvel Avengers, LEGO Dimensions, LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens, LEGO Rock Band, and LEGO Bionicle Heroes. Count that, 21 games in one generation. Talk about saturation, and they still keep pumping these out on newer systems today. To be honest, LEGO 2K Drive is pretty fun though. They branched out all over the place as well, such as into the rhythm genre, when they partnered with Harmonix to make LEGO Rock Band, or when they jumped into the Toys to Life craze with LEGO Dimensions. LEGO Bionicle was a third-person shooter, but apart from that, all the other titles play almost identically, just with a different skin. If you've played one of these, you've played them all. But is that a bad thing? Not really. They didn't plan on people playing everyone in the series, just the ones that appeal to you. And if you keep your playing of these games rather casual, they can be a bit of dumb fun. Just don't aim to complete them all like I tried. It causes serious burnout. At the time of writing, most of these can be had for under £10 each, and the hardest one to track down was most likely Bionicle Heroes. It's also the hardest to probably get any enjoyment out of as well. Dimensions isn't hard to come by, but it is getting pricey now since you've got to buy all the figures and the portal and everything to play it. But apparently it's quite good. I've actually never given that one a go. I found it really hard to find a second-hand portal with all the bits. Since we're still talking about games that are easy to come by when collecting for the Xbox 360, I think we need to give a quick mention to the sports games. I won't list all these off here as there's so many of them. They include the likes of FIFA, Madden, multiple NBA games, NHL games, the wrestling games, golf games, and more. Most of these people can't even give away, so you'll always find these included in bundles. Strange there is a couple though with some value, and they can get very pricey, but they'll be covered later on in the video. Plus I don't like sports, so I don't really want to talk about it. The two biggies from Rockstar are up next. Both Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption are always seen in people's collections and are in large supply. There is technically 3 Grand Theft Auto games on the Xbox 360, these being Grand Theft Auto 4, Grand Theft Auto 5 and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I say technically as there are also expansions for GTA available, such as the episodes from Liberty City got a physical release. Unlike other expansions we talked about earlier for Fallout and Oblivion, these could be played without the original GTA 4 disc and work as small standalone titles. The 2 expansions included on the disc are The Lost and the Damned and The Ballad of Gay Tony. San Andreas is the priciest title from the Grand Theft Auto series for the system in the UK, running you about £22, while the other standard editions are just under £10. The other popular Rockstar game was Red Dead Redemption. It's basically Grand Theft Auto in a Wild West setting. GT nay, if you will. Again, this got a standalone expansion release called Undead Nightmare, which could be played without the original game. This mixes it up and puts a bit of a horror spin on it. Both GTA 4 and Red Dead have Game of the Year editions, and these are the ones you're going to want to look out for, as they contain the original games and all the DLC. These are starting to climb in price though. There isn't much to say about Grand Theft Auto 5 though. It's the same game that's been released for the next 2 generations, but with less features, and the online's been shut down. If you're looking to buy Grand Theft Auto 5 on the 360, make sure it has both the play and install discs. So many times you'll find it out in the wild without the play disc, as it's been left in a console somewhere. There are other Rockstar games available, but they didn't get the same amount of love on the console. These will be covered later on. Up next is another Microsoft Game Studios exclusive. This is the Fable series. There are 4 games in total on the system. Fable 2, Fable 3, Fable Anniversary and Fable The Journey. These are action RPGs with a great emphasis on humour, and particularly British humour. These feature the voices of many well-known British actors such as Stephen Fry. We will start with Fable Anniversary as this is a remaster of the first game that came out exclusively on the original Xbox back in 2004. I say exclusively, I think there might have been a PC version. That's not a console, that doesn't count. It's also the priciest at about £12 in CEX, but that's not going to break the bank for anyone. Its sequels Fable 2 and 3 are much more affordable, only running a couple of pounds though. Again, Fable 2 has a Game of the Year edition including the DLC, which bumps the price up closer to £10, and it's the one you really want to look out for. Fable The Journey is an odd one though. It's an on-rails Connect game. It's also the one that seems to have been forgotten and didn't review very well at all. But again, you could also add it to your collection for just a couple of quid. Just remember you need the Connect camera if you want to be able to play it. And if you're like me and you're British, our houses were not built for that thing. I would recommend these games. They're light-hearted and not difficult at all. They're also backwards compatible and included on Xbox Game Pass, so this will probably keep the price down. Apart from Fable The Journey, as no Connect games are backwards compatible. Also, if you're an achievement hunter, Fable Anniversary annoyingly has a discontinued achievement, as you had to be able to connect it to Microsoft's Smart Glass, which no longer exists. Let's talk about the most well-known RPG series on the console, and that's the Final Fantasy games. Like everything else in this well-known section of the video, it has multiple entries. These are Final Fantasy 11, 13, 13-2, and 13 Lightning Returns. Unfortunately 11 is an online-only game, and you can no longer play this on Xbox 360, but if you're going for a full set of the physicals, this is something you're going to want to collect. Even if the discs are just drinks coasters by now. There are multiple versions of the online game available, and some are harder to come by than others. Also, shops don't often stock these anymore since they can't be played, and eBay is the only way to go about grabbing them. The 13 games, however, are a standard JRPG affair, with each game slightly tweaking the battle system. There's not much really to say about these. If you're into game collecting, you know what Final Fantasy is. Lightning Returns is a spin-off, which has a more action-based combat system, but other than that, they're your standard RPG affair. 13 is known as a bit of a corridor simulator though. To be honest, I've never finished any of these. I probably should get around to it. Yet again though, at the making of this video, all these were really affordable, and you'll get some serious game time for your small investment. EA's long-running Need for Speed series continued on into the Xbox 360 generation with a bang. There was 10 games in the franchise released for the system. These were Need for Speed Most Wanted. They call it the 06 edition, you'll realise why later. Carbon, Pro Street, Undercover, Most Wanted 2016, there you go, that's where the confusion comes in. The Run, Shift 1 and Shift 2, Hot Pursuit, and Rivals. Strangely, there are 2 games called Most Wanted, the first being released in 06 and was a launch title for the system. This is a HD upscaling of the PS2 game of the same name. Unfortunately, it's also one that's climbing in price. You're looking at close to £45 now here in the UK for it. The second Most Wanted was released by the Burnout creators Criterion, and it feels more like a Burnout game than a Need for Speed game. Carbon is the follow-up to Most Wanted 06, and plays mostly the same. The Pro Street and Shift games are track racers. Pro Street was made by Black Box Studios and is a pretty poor entry in the series. The Shift games, on the other hand, were created by Slightly Mad Studios, who went on to make the Project Cars series, and I found these to be the best Need for Speed games on the whole system. But that's a bit of a hot take, a lot of people don't like them. A lot of people struggle with the handling, but the games are built to be played in a cockpit view, and if you play like this, you will get an incredibly immersive racing experience. The Run is set out like a race across the United States, so your playthrough never really looks or feels the same all the way through. This was panned on release, but people are starting now to see that it is a bit of a hidden gem. Hot Pursuit feels like more of the Most Wanted remake, and again, it just feels more like a Burnout game than a Need for Speed game. Same could be said for Rivals, but this one sadly is an online required game. Currently it is still able to be played, but one day it will hit that fabled coaster status. Give this one a go before it's too late. It's pretty good. Failing that, it is also available on the Xbox One, but it too will find a similar fate in the end. All of these games other than the Most Wanted 06 will run you a couple of pounds, with the second highest being Carbon at about 8, so there's no reason not to add them to your collection.
Resident Evil.
The most popular horror franchise, Resident Evil, also graced the console with its presence. There were 5 physical games in total in the English-speaking world. These were Resident Evil 5, 6, Operation Raccoon City, Revelations 1 and Revelations 2. I'll get to why I said English-speaking world later in the video. Again, all of these are very affordable, with them topping out at about £8, but this might be because they've been released on everything. Unfortunately, the Resident Evil games of this era are of a bit of a questionable quality. I'd recommend Resident Evil 5 only for playing with a friend in co-op, as the AI partner is a nightmare. Resident Evil 6 is a tough play though after the Leon campaign is over, and Operation Raccoon City is a team-based third-person shooter. The Revelation games I've heard are good and feel more like a survival horror game, but I've yet to play them. I do have them in my personal collection. It's just a case of too many games, too little time. At least it's good to see that in the following generations, Capcom can be trusted with their IPs again. These games just need a mention, as you will find the Xbox 360 is littered with Kinect-ready dance titles. It's like the only thing the peripheral was actually good at doing. Since these were yearly releases, you'll see them everywhere, and most of the original ones are cheap enough just to add to the collection if you're going for a full set, or even a Kinect subset in general. But the later ones are actually quite pricey. Again, they show up quite often, but usually sit in the shop forever, as it's only full set collectors looking for these at this point in the console's lifecycle. There are a lot of one-off dancing games too that are a bit more obscure, like Hip Hop Dance Experience or Grease Dance. These might be harder to find, but they're still cheap. I just thought they were worth a mention. Just like the dancing games, at one point the Guitar Hero franchise was dominating the sales charts. Due to this, you'll find a lot of games out in the wild without the instruments. Unfortunately, this is due to the build quality of them being overall pretty poor and just breaking down. Now on the second-hand market, the instruments are going for some crazy money. If you want one that will last, with the best build quality, look for the Explorer guitar. This is the white wired one that came with Guitar Hero 2. This will work on all the guitar games apart from Guitar Hero Live, which requires its own 6-button controller. Strangely, most of these games are unplayable without the instruments, but Guitar Hero 2 and 3 do allow you to use a regular controller, and it doesn't play too badly. Guitar Hero 3 even has an achievement for beating the career with an actual controller. All this is a shame though, as some of these games are great, which are just being held hostage behind gatekeeping resellers of the instruments. Moral of the story is, if you see any of this stuff cheap, grab it for your collection instantly. Guitar Hero wasn't the only big player in the plastic instrument war. There was also Rock Band. This was the first to introduce other instruments, such as the drum kit, and later evolve into the pro instruments, such as the keyboard and the pro guitar. The keyboard isn't too hard to come by, and it's well made, but the pro drums and the pro guitar weren't made in great numbers and could be a little tricky to come by. These allowed the game to have a more realistic music experience. For example, the pro guitar is a 6-string guitar with a button for each fret. It can get pretty intense, but we're not here for the peripherals. The actual games themselves, they pop up quite often, and they're cheap. But you'd imagine they pop up pretty often, since Guitar Hero alone had 10 releases. Damn, that was a monster section. But there are just so many games on the system, I wanted to talk about a good handful of the main types of titles you'll run into regularly on your collecting journey. In this next tier, we'll talk about the games that got overlooked when they came out, but are really worth your time and money if you see them, and a few that aren't, but they may start to climb in price in the coming years. Vanquish is one I wasn't sure whether I should put it on the list or not, since it was released again on the Xbox One, but it was bundled with Bayonetta, and because of this I felt it more had of a, oh, that game's just tacked in with Bayonetta feel to it. In reality, you're doing yourself a disservice to not have this one in your collection. It's developed by Platinum Games. Vanquish is a super fast and stylish third-person shooter, where the main mechanic is to keep moving by sliding about the level with rocket-propelled boots. Don't let the idea of a game published by Platinum put you off if you think it'll be too hard. On the lower difficulties, this game is rather forgiving. It's when you start increasing difficulties when you'll have to bring your A game. This isn't one I think is going to spike in price anytime soon due to its re-release, but it has been removed from the Xbox Live Store, and the only way to play the Xbox 360 version is to grab the physical copy. And again, here in the UK, it'll only run you about £1.50. So if you see it, I wouldn't leave this one sitting in the shop. There were two Condemned games released on the Xbox 360. The first being Condemned Criminal Origins, and the second, Condemned 2 Bloodshot. They are both first-person horror games with detective elements. There is more focus on using the improvised melee weapons you find in your surroundings rather than guns though. The second game does have a higher focus on gunplay, and overall is the weaker of the two games because of it. You'll find yourself looking for clues in run-down apartments and being jumped by junkies. There's also a supernatural element to it, but it's the aforementioned junkies that provide the main scares as they scurry through the crawl spaces and sneak up on you. The sound design for such an early title is top-notch, and you can really feel the blows that you hand out. The sounds of metal on skull, it's pretty nasty. The first Condemned is actually an exclusive to the console, while the sequel also came out on the PS3. The original was also the first physical 360 title not to be released with a 1000 gamer score. For some reason it maxes out at 970G. I think the plan was originally some DLC to top it up to 1000, but they never got that far. That or they just couldn't count. These are both still cheap games, each only costing £3 in CEX, but I feel like they have a lot going for them in the future as a collectible series. Especially with the first having the two main factors to make something collectible. One, it's a horror game, and two, it's exclusive. This is a good metric to follow for what you should be grabbing when you see things cheap on your game hunts. Viva Pinata is a cute looking game in which you tend to a garden and welcome in the local wildlife, which all happen to be pinatas. Throughout the game you complete tasks to tame them and keep them as pets, which you have to keep well and breed. The pinatas you currently have in your garden can be used to entice different ones to show up. It's got a bit of a Pokemon style collecting aspect to it, where you want to fill out your encyclopedia with all the available pinatas. It's a relaxing game and surprisingly addictive. It's also exclusive, but because the Xbox's target audience wasn't into this type of game, I think a lot of people overlook this. Now you may be wondering why I've put Viva Pinata into this category. It didn't sell bad, and 2 of the 3 games for the system are included in the Rare Replay compilation on the Xbox One, and it's also part of Game Pass. These are the original Viva Pinata and Viva Pinata Trouble in Paradise. For some reason they decided to omit Viva Pinata Party Animals, which is just a minigame compilation. It is backwards compatible though. So why should you pick up the Xbox 360 versions? Well, Trouble in Paradise if you want to get specific. It's simply a tip for achievement hunters out there. The 360 version supports the use of the Xbox Vision camera, which is a small webcam peripheral released near the beginning of the console's lifecycle. This allows you to scan cards which can either be created by other users or downloaded off the internet to import any pinata into your garden. This means a lot of the harder to come by pinatas or some of the almost impossible ones can be achieved using this method. This also doubles up for the use in the Rare Replay achievement list, as you have to unlock certain numbers of achievements within inside the game to collect stamps, which are also tied to achievements, but this will have to be done whilst playing the actual 360. The Vision camera is not supported by Xbox One. Luckily, the camera itself can be had for pennies, since it doesn't have too many uses. There are a few other games with achievements tied to it, like Rainbow Six Vegas, which is used to import your face onto a character, which is what it's mostly used for. Luckily, as the trend is going with these games, these are still cheap as chips, and the most expensive currently being £2.50 in CEX. Again, another game which has been re-released on newer hardware. So why urge people to pick up Sleeping Dogs? No other reason than it's just a very good game, and the original versions are just more plentiful than the Xbox One version. Sleeping Dogs is a third-person open-world game set in Hong Kong. You play an undercover police officer tasked with taking down triad activity. You spend most of your time hijacking cars for word traversal and completing missions. Think Grand Theft Auto style. Where this differs though is the focus on martial arts combat. It employs a similar fighting style to what has been seen in the Batman Arkham games, where you chain together big combos of reversal moves to keep the combat fluid. You do get guns in the game, but these are more of an as and when thing. You can holster pistols, but anything larger can be picked up off of enemies, but when they run out of ammo, they're just tossed aside. The world itself isn't large, but feels very alive, and there's plenty of mini-games to keep you entertained, such as karaoke, which kind of gives it a bit of a Yakuza feel. Again, going by the CX website, this can be snagged for as little as £1.50, and that's a hell of a lot of quality game for your money. How Blue Dragon gets as overlooked as it does is beyond me. It's a massive traditional turn-based RPG made by the people behind Final Fantasy and the Dragon Quest games, which also includes the Dragon Ball anime. If this was released on the PlayStation or a Nintendo console, I can see it being an instant classic and commanding a decent price. This may sound like crazy speculation, but its spin-off games released on the Nintendo DS are already climbing, with one of them already over £50. It was the first game released on the Xbox 360 to use multiple discs, so if you see this on your travels, make sure all 3 discs are present at time of purchase. Random story about this game, it was a few friends of my hangover game. We would put this on after a night out, and we played through the game so many times using the new Game Plus mode until we unlocked all the achievements. It never got boring and kept us entertained for well over 100 hours. So this comes highly recommended at just £5 for its current price. You'd be mad not to grab this if traditional RPGs are your thing. You never know. It may one day be worth something too. Now seems like a good time to talk about another game by Mistwalker, the people behind Blue Dragon. Lost Odyssey plays like a forgotten Final Fantasy game and was praised highly on release. Again, it's a traditional turn-based RPG. You know, the kind that on any other system would be commanding a stupid price by now. This, like Blue Dragon, is difficult to summarise the story without giving the plot away, so I'll just say, if you like the genre, why don't you have it in your collection? It's another multi-disc spanning epic, this time covering 4 discs. The 4th one is quite often missing because it's only housed inside a paper sleeve that's tucked in with the manual, so again, be aware of this if you're looking for it. I was about to say that, being more critically acclaimed, this game was somehow surprisingly cheaper than Blue Dragon, but I've just looked it up and it's now shot up to £8. The pricing information in this is going to be seriously out of date by the time it comes out. Unlike a lot of games on the Xbox 360 which also got a PC port, both Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey did not, so it means they're both definitely stuck on the system. Well, unless they get a remaster, of course. Well, they're only kind of stuck there. They are actually on the backward compatible list for the Xbox One and Series X. This might be what keeps the price down a little bit compared to other RPGs that are stuck on systems. I can see the physicals of these jumping up in price when the store shuts down though. The other well-known horror franchise also saw some games on the Xbox 360. There were 3 Silent Hill releases, these being Silent Hill Homecoming, Silent Hill Downpour, and the Silent Hill HD collection, which was meant to be a remaster of both Silent Hill 2 and 3 from the PS2, which sounds like a dream come true for a Silent Hill fan. Silent Hill, in HD, with achievements, perfection. But that's not how it happened. They lost the original source code and rushed it to print, just slapping it together, and it turned out to be a game you really shouldn't play. But for a collector's piece, it's a weird bit of history, and the Silent Hill games are always bound to climb in price, good or bad. It's already £28 in CEX, and this Silent Hill tax can be seen with Downpour now hitting almost £40. The cheapest of the 3 is Silent Hill Homecoming at currently around £15. Though these are pricier than the games mentioned on this list already, they're far from unknown, unfortunately for bad reasons as they aren't the best games. I would say Homecoming is the most playable, but its focus on action takes away from anything that would be scary. But Downpour has the better story, but I always found it littered with bugs, and found sections of the game I couldn't pass as door handles wouldn't load. So let's conclude, not the best games to play, but ones you shouldn't wait too long to jump on from a collector's perspective. Everybody's heard about the Crash Bandicoot games, but not everyone knows there was 2 released on the Xbox 360, these being Crash of the Titans and Crash Mind Over Mutant. Both of the games were released closer to the launch of the system rather than the later stages of its life, being both released in 2007 and 2008. Unlike the earlier titles which focused mainly on platforming, these are beat-em-up games, with a little bit of platforming thrown in. They also try to make Crash a bit more edgy with tattoos, and it just doesn't feel right. Overall, they're okay for a quick play, but it's nothing you'll be feeling the need to ever come back to. So why do I think this is something you should add to your collection? Well, like the Need for Speed Most Wanted game, these were also released on the last generation hardware, and the Wii. This means the Xbox 360 version is the only official HD release of these games, and from what I've played, the best place to play them. Luckily these have come down a bit in price recently, and both can be grabbed for between £10 and £20. They're also not backwards compatible, but they are still available in the Xbox Live Store, whilst it's still around. So when the store closes in a couple of months, the only way to get a HD version of this game will be the physical copies on the Xbox 360. You never know, Microsoft owns Activision now, so you might see a remaster or something, but I don't think anybody's really asking for it. What is seen by many as the definitive skating game experience has all 3 entries available on the Xbox 360. Also, all 3 are backwards compatible with newer hardware. But again, when the store closes, the only way to be able to play these on newer consoles will be with the original physical discs. Both the original Skate and Skate 3 are still available to purchase digitally, but Skate 2 has already been delisted. This is reflected in the price as it's the only one of the 3 in double figures. But just barely, it's about £10. When they all become physical only and copies start to dry up, people will be after these and the price will slowly climb. If you do add these to your library, be aware that they have DLC content, some which has already been removed, so it might be a good idea to grab whatever still remains on the store while you can. This might still be available since they're backwards compatible, you never know. We'll also quickly mention that if skating games are your thing, there are plenty other available on the console too. Again, with it being the only place to get a HD version of Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. You never know, if people enjoy this video, I might do a follow-up and include other skating games available on the system. I've decided to lump these next 2 games together, as even though they weren't developed by the same companies or have anything to do with each other, they were just released incredibly close together, and at the time of release, people were either Team Blur or Team Split Second for their arcade racing action. Blur is basically Mario Kart with real cars. You race around the track, pick up power-ups, and try to take out the other racers. The online mode for this was one of the best around, and it is actually still pretty active to this day. Not sure how long the online will be available for though. You know, the people behind it knew what they were doing, as it was developed by Bizarre Creations, the people behind the Project Gotham Racing series. Sadly, it's another Xbox exclusive I'm not going to talk about today. Maybe next time. Sadly, it was also their swan song, but it was a great one to go out on. Pick this up if you see it. By now, it's well known to be a solid title, but it's not part of the backwards compatible list, and this was most likely due to all the licensed cars in the game. It is owned by Activision though, so let's just hope for a revival. Currently, the game is only £5 in CX, so jump on it if you see it. Split Second, on the other hand, is an even cheaper game, coming in at £2.50. The gimmick here is you charge up what is known as power plays, which can be used to blow up large portions of the tracks to completely change their layout and take out opponents. This has a more Burnout style aesthetic, and strangely was published by Disney of all people. This one is on the backwards compatible list, so the price should stay low until it gets delisted. This was my favourite of the 2, but I recommend both games. Alice Madness Returns is the sequel to American McGee's Alice, which was released on the PC back in 2000, which luckily is included as the DLC for this game. It used to be behind a paywall, but they removed that a long time ago. You play a mentally unstable Alice as she explores a twisted version of Wonderland. The game is a 3D platformer with some shooting mechanics. It's another game which was always given the label of hidden gem for a while, which caused its price to climb. Now it's part of EA Play and included on Game Pass, so it has dropped a little. I do feel if it's ever removed from these services though, the price will start to climb again, simply because the game is so good. It uses a very unique art style. Closest comparison would be a Tim Burton movie, but it sets itself apart from his work. Currently it's only £15 in the UK. Another tip for people in the UK, the NTSC copy of this game is actually region free, and if you see it being sold at a discounted rate because of this at a gaming convention, pick it up, as you'll still be able to play it. You will need an American account though if you want to access the DLC. Another long-running franchise to return to the Xbox 360 was the Worms games. You know, them games where you have teams of cartoony worms on a 2D plane where you fire all sorts of wacky weaponry at each other, either trying to deplete the worms' health or knock them into the water, all while deforming the terrain and hope to leave them exposed for more attacks. Yeah, that's the one. The 2 physical releases were compilations of other smaller games. The Worms collection, which includes Worms, Worms Ultimate Mayhem, and Worms 2 Armageddon, and the other being the Worms Revolution collection, which only consists of Worms Revolution and strangely Worms 2 Armageddon again. Both of these games are great for collectors though, as the discs contain the DLC for all of the games listed, and anytime you can get physical DLC, you know you're onto a winner. Again, these are both affordable for what you get in the packages, and can be had for between £8 to £10 each. These do have a tendency to fluctuate in price quite a bit though. 99 Nights was a very early title on the system, released back in 2006. It was very similar to the Dynasty Warriors games, in which you go up against hundreds of enemies at once, laying waste to dozens in one swing of your sword. Oddly, this was published by Microsoft Game Studios, and when it came out there was quite a lot of hype for it. Fast forward today and it's mostly forgotten, even though it did receive a sequel. To be honest, it's a pretty fun little game, but the difficulty does spike here and there. I'm looking at you, giant frog man. I think it was a frog anyway. I've not played this since 2006. This wasn't exclusive for the console, but it seems to get no love. So if you see it, pick it up. It's only cheap as well at £3.50 in CEX. This might actually be the priciest launch exclusive yet from Microsoft. Pick it up if Muso games are your thing. Wet is perfect for this tier. It's not the best game ever, but it went for style, and even with everything that made it unique, most people have just forgotten about it. It's a third-person shooter hack and slash, which allows you to run on walls, slide on your knees, and jump around like a madwoman, all while causing as much gory violence as you can. It has a similar vibe to that of Grindhouse Cinema, and it fits this game perfectly. Don't expect this game to be easy though. It might actually be perfect for the people who are into the newer wave of tougher Souls-like games. Well, on the higher difficulties at least. This was published by Bethesda, but it's strangely not backwards compatible, so the 360 is the only place to play the Xbox version. This won't win any awards, but if you want some mindless action, pick it up for your collection. It's currently only £3 in CEX, but you never know. Maybe it's gone under the radar enough to maybe one day be collectible. As I said earlier, I'd give a quick mention to the other Rockstar games that don't get enough love, so I thought I'd do it here at the end of this tier. There are a few that can be bought dirt cheap, such as Table Tennis or LA Noire. Don't sleep on Table Tennis, not because it's collectible, just because it's a surprisingly good game. It was made to test the engine for GTA 4, and to be honest it still looks quite good today. LA Noire, on the other hand, has multiple versions. You want to be looking out for the complete edition, which sadly comes in a cardboard box and can be rather beaten up most of the time. If you find this in good condition and for a good price, don't sleep on it. It's a fantastic detective game set in 1940s LA and still contains some of the best facial animation I've ever seen in a game. This has been re-released on newer systems with all of the content, but with the store shutting down soon, and if you really want the DLC for the 360 version, make sure you grab the complete edition. To be honest, I really enjoyed the extra cases and I feel they actually added to the overall game and don't feel like they've just been tacked on. Rockstar also released a racer on the 360 in the form of Midnight Club Los Angeles. This is the follow-up to the games released on the PS2 and original Xbox. It's an open-world street racing game, and a good one at that. From a collecting point of view, it's not expensive, and it'll run you about £5 to £10 here in the UK. But what you want to look out for again is the complete edition, coming with all the DLC. This quite often just goes out in the shops at the same price as the original, but I can see this one rising in price as the store closes. If you're really OCD though, this only comes in an Xbox Classics edition, so it might stick out in your shelf like a sore thumb. The most expensive of the other Rockstar games is Bully Scholarship Edition. For a long time this was the only way to play Bully in HD, and it held its value. Since there's now PS4 digital copies, the price has dropped down to about £15, but I argue this is still the best way to play. From what I believe, the PS4 version is just an emulated version of the PS2 game, while this was made to run natively on the Xbox 360. It's also backwards compatible on the Series X, so you can take advantage of all the hardware improvements when playing this game if you wish. Here we will talk about the games that are climbing in value and so far haven't seemed to want to slow down. But remember, it only takes one re-release for these to plummet in value. Doesn't mean these editions will be easier to find as time goes on though. First up, we need to talk about X-Blades. It's not an expensive game to pick up. It only goes for around £10 to £15 here. It's a budget third-person hack and slash game, and overall, it's not that good. So why do I mention it? Well, I got a sequel/reboot by the name of Blades of Time. This one actually had a bit more work put into it, and it had a focus on time manipulation and making clones of yourself. Again, it's nothing special game-wise, but for a collector, it's one to look out for. It's currently sitting around the £45 to £48 mark for an Xbox 360 copy, but the PS3 is a staggering £100 on CEX now. To me, this indicates that a price rise for the 360 version is soon on the cards. This is one that took a long time to show up near me, and I've heard of a few people having issues trying to track down a clean copy. So if you see this one in your hunts for cheap, grab it. Next we have Tornado Outbreak. This Konami game is pretty much just a Katamari clone. You play as a little tornado and have to whiz around the environment, sucking up all you can to grow bigger and stronger and absorb larger items. It's actually quite a bit of fun. It's not one that shows up very often, but it does pop up from time to time here in the UK, but it usually doesn't have the English back cover. This isn't something that bugs me, but a lot of people really want all their game cases to be in one language. Again, this one is cheaper on the Xbox 360, sitting at £62, with the PS3 version again going up to a whopping £95. Keep an eye out for this one before it hits them PS3 price levels. Even when this was cheap, I struggled to find it, to be honest with you. Asterix at the Olympic Games is an odd one. It's a very early title on the system and was a port of the PS2 game of the same name. It's not a game that shows up all that much in the wild at all, with most people resorting to have to find it at conventions or online. Strangely, the pricing for this game is all over the show. Not long ago, it was the highest priced single release game for the Xbox 360 that CEX carried. It was coming in at over £70, but today it's down to as low as £32. I see no rhyme or reason for this, but it jumps about all the time. 28 is the lowest I've seen it, so it hasn't climbed that much recently up to 32, but this does seem like the perfect time to jump on it. But by the time this is out, it may have just shot back up for no reason at all. It's actually quite a fun little game as well. It's a third-person platformer, with the odd Olympic Games minigame thrown in. It's also an easy completion if you're after those precious gamerscore points. Cars 3 again is a bit of a strange one. It's in this category because it was the last Xbox 360 game that wasn't a yearly release, like a dancing game or a sports game, in PAL territories at least. For a while it kept its value of over £40, but in recent years it has dropped down to about £20. This is still £10 more than its next-gen counterpart, which is sitting as low as £10. I've recently played this one on the Xbox One, and if you're hoping for something as good as Cars 2, I'd be prepared to be a bit disappointed. It doesn't feel as fleshed out to me, but the mechanics are still solid. You never know about this one, it may become sought after down the line, so it's one to look out for. Anything that's usually near the end of a console's life cycle will increase in value over time. I don't know if it had a massive print run or not, but I'm going to say it must have been smaller than usual, as this was primarily an Xbox One and PS4 title. It may seem strange putting all the Spider-Man games together in one entry, but in recent years these have become hard to come by and are climbing in value. On the 360 there are 7 Spider-Man titles. These are Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man Friend or Foe, Spider-Man Web of Shadows, Spider-Man Edge of Time, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2. In the UK these range from £12 for the Amazing Spider-Man all the way up to £85 for Web of Shadows. The reason these are climbing in value is that Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man, and with the newer Spider-Man games being big hits for Sony and PlayStation exclusives, these are all the Xbox gamers have from their friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man. It's highly likely these are also the last Spider-Man games to be released on a platform other than the PlayStation. Spider-Man Friend or Foe and Spider-Man 3 were released on other platforms such as the PlayStation 2 and the Wii, with a few handheld versions thrown in, but the Xbox 360 is the only place you can play Friend or Foe in HD. Spider-Man 3 got a release on the PS3 though. These are definitely one to look out for when you're out in your car boot sales. I have started most of the entries in this tier with This is a Strange One, but this is a strange one. It's an action RPG set in the mind of Frédéric Chopin, the famous composer in the final stages of his life as he's dying from tuberculosis. The game uses a really colourful cel-shaded art style and still looks great to this day. It was originally released as an Xbox 360 exclusive, but later got a release on the PS3. During the game, the combat is turn-based, but you're given a set amount of time to freely run around and attack enemies on the playing field, but you will also have to use this time to retreat to safety. Also, certain characters become weaker or stronger in light or darkness, so use shadows to your advantage. Strangely, this game is also multiplayer for an RPG. Your party of 3 characters can be controlled with multiple players, and can add more depth when played together. Unfortunately, this is couch co-op only. I cannot explain any of this story to you as it is just weird. It's a game with an ending which to this day randomly pops into my mind, and I still don't know what it was on about. This is still currently rather cheap, and a copy at CEX will run you under £10. Sadly, it's more than double that if you want it on the PS3. Even though this one is very affordable, I can see it increasing in price after the 360 store shuts down, as it's not backwards compatible with the Series X. I had a blast with this game, and I found the combat refreshing, but if you do pick this one up, be prepared for a full-on fever dream. Probably from all that tuberculosis. Saying this one is obscure when there are 5 games in the series on the 360 doesn't sound right to me, but it's only people who are going out of their way to track these down that seem to have ever given them a go. They're more prevalent in Europe as it's based on a German TV show called Alarm for Cobra 11. Well, that probably sounds wrong, but I don't know what 11 is in German. All the games are pretty similar, complete missions in an open world city in a very janky budget racer cop chase setting. Luckily the game's quality does improve over time, and go from PS2 looking to 360 launch game by the end. The weakest sadly in the series in my opinion is Crash Time 4, as it has you doing the same mission over and over and just taking down random vehicles until you've taken down an entire syndicate. This is where the series ended outside of Europe, and I can see why if it left a sour taste in gamers' mouths elsewhere. It's a shame though, as Crash Time 5 Undercover is most likely the strongest in the series, and I would actually give it a recommendation. Due to its smaller release though, it's also the highest price of the bunch, and one of the highest priced games on the 360 here in the UK. The price fluctuates, but currently at the time of writing it's available in CEX for just £55, but it has jumped as high as £75 before, with eBay of course being even more escalated. The other games are all over the place in pricing, starting from around £10, all the way up to the upper echelons at the 5th entry commands, but I can see all of these becoming a pricier curio in the coming years. I bet this is one that not many people have heard of. Battle vs Chess. So what is it? It's just a chess game at heart with a slightly fancy skin over the top of it. It also contains some mini games or something, but I've yet to give it a go myself. The reason for this one being a bit on the obscure side is that it was blocked from sale in the US due to a trademark conflict. They got around this by changing its name. In the US it is known as Czech vs Mate. Since this took place, to my knowledge, it never got a physical release over there. It did come out digitally though, but if you're after a physical copy, you're going to have to head to the European market. If you have no way to play import games, it's also available here on the PS3, and that version is region free. It also has a very nice slipcover available for it that opens up like a book. This makes it worth the purchase even if you have no plans on playing it. Sadly, my copy's missing the slip, but I got it very cheap. Apparently the game runs on a processor-heavy engine. When you put the game on higher difficulties, it's possible to cause the computer to take up to 15 minutes to think about what it's going to play. I haven't tested this yet because I don't feel like melting my console. The Xbox 360 is known for being a great system for Japanese horizontal and vertical shooters. This was due to the Xbox being snubbed by the Japanese market, and Microsoft made a big push to try and get Japanese developers on board and get their brand out there. This didn't go well, but it did mean we got some good games released over on our shores. And even more in Japan, but we'll get to them later. We got a decent amount of games released digitally, such as Radiant Silvergun, Ikaruga, King of Fighters Sky Stage and Raystorm, just to mention a handful. Quite a few of these are backwards compatible on the Series X, so shouldn't be going anywhere after the store shutdown, but it's worth having a look through and grabbing what you can while it's still available for the 360. But we're not here talking digital, are we? Let's highlight the physical shmups which we got on the British shores. Up first is Under Defeat HD. This is a re-release of an older arcade game made for Sega's Naomi arcade board, which as you can guess meant it was also a Dreamcast game. It's a vertical shooter where you play as a helicopter with a massive hitbox. This is probably the weakest game to be mentioned here, but that doesn't mean it's bad, and I'm still happy that it got a disc-based release. This one will run you in the region of £12, but I can see this one climbing one day. Up next is Akai Katana, a horizontal bullet hell game released by Cave, and it's a great one at that. Unlike the typical aerial vehicle shooters, you play as weird floating people with swords, but it works. Don't worry, you still fire bullets back. This one is tough as nails though, but it has unlimited continues so anyone can see it through to the end. But the achievements on the other hand, that's another kettle of fish. This is another one that will run you about £25. I wouldn't sleep on this though, as for the longest time you could snag it for under a fiver. So this price increase is pretty drastic. It might level out though, as it's had a re-release on the Switch and PS4 I believe. Let's get back into another cave shooter though, Dodonpachi Resurrection. This is actually the 5th game in a long running series, but the only one on the 360 to hit the UK. Again, this goes down the bullet hell route, but unlike Akai Katana, it's a vertical shooter, and you're back to using the good old spaceships as your avatar. Out of all the shooters released here, this is the priciest, currently sitting around the £45 mark. I was lucky enough to find it once for 98p when a local game store was shutting down, but like an idiot, I sold it and had to buy it back. We all make stupid mistakes in this game collecting world. Again, this one's hard as balls, but you can keep playing with unlimited continues until you've got the practice down and you can tackle it like a boss. The last one to talk about is Death Smiles, and surprise surprise, it's another cave game, and another bullet hell shooter at that. This time it goes back to the horizontal floating humanoid genre. This game is mad though. Whenever I think about it, I'm reminded that you have to face off against floating cow enemies and giant cubes. This one also hovers around the £20 mark, but it has also been re-released along with its sequel for more modern systems. Out of all these shooters, this is the one that I enjoyed the most, although it is probably sacrilegious as I didn't choose Dodonpachi as the best. This is another one with a strange name change here in Powerlands. The game is known as William Pinball Classics, but over in the States it goes by the name Pinball Hall of Fame, The Williams Collection. The reason for this, I have no idea, but we will refer to it as Williams Pinball Classics, as it's less of a mouthful. This is just a collection of classic pinball machines with goals tied to them. Why is it pricey? I do not know. The UK copy will actually set you back more than the US copy, which is a bit of a rarity when it comes to game collecting. Well, on eBay at least it will. It's available at time of writing for £28 in CEX, but it rarely pops up in stock these days. I think this is due to people trying to flip them over on eBay, as the prices range from £45 to £80 over there. Whoever's paying £80 for it needs to have a word with themselves. It does seem that the UK PAL copy is more desirable than the many from mainland Europe or Australia. But at the end of the day, it's the same game, and pick up the one you're willing to part with your hard-earned cash for. I say this one is set for the completionists only, as there are plenty of better pinball games out there on more modern systems. I bet you didn't imagine to see a Spyro game this far down on the list. This released around the same time as the Crash Bandicoot games on the Xbox 360, and it was largely ignored. It came out on everything that was current at the time, and even one on the PS2, as it was still in the phase of winding down. It is the third in the Legend of Spyro series, which included A New Beginning and Eternal Night over on the PS2. Like these, the game didn't actually review very well at all, but it feels like the strongest of the three. I've put it this high on the list just down to personal experience. I never actually see this apart from online, while I find the Crash Bandicoot games out and about much more often. This could be down to my location. But this is my list, damn it. It's also one you should probably jump on here in the UK. It's currently at CEX, it will only run you £25, and being a 360 game, it's likely to come complete with manual. This is the same as paying for a disc-only copy over on eBay. This has, however, lost value over the years. Complete at one point, it was 50 to 60, but you can grab a complete one now over on eBay for £45. I think the reason for this not being that common is it's an early cross-generation title, like Need for Speed Most Wanted 06, and we all know how that one's turning out these days. Hear me out with this one. FIFA 19. Let's continue with another cross-generation title, but this time going the other way. This was released right at the end of the console lifecycle. It's branded as a Legacy Edition, which to my knowledge is just a roster update of an earlier title. I think 18 and 19 released on the 360 are just updates of FIFA 17, but I could be wrong. I don't follow football or any of its games, so this is a grey area for me. But what I can say for certain is this one's going to run you a little bit of cash. It goes for roughly the £40 mark, which seems mad for an old sports game, but trust me, they can get much worse if you're going for the whole worldwide set. This one jumps about though, it's been as high as 60 at some points, and I think it dropped to lowest about 35. I was lucky enough to find a sealed copy of this years ago on Facebook Marketplace for £10, but over the years of moving it about on the shelf, it's started to unseal itself, which is a shame as I was never going to play this one. It would have pained me if I paid full whack for it. I didn't like parting with a tenner. I'm just going to throw this out here, pick this one up sooner rather than later. Or failing that, pick up the DLC for the game before the store vanishes, if you're not going to be playing it on newer systems. I mention this as the game is set out in an episodic format, and the last episode or two were download only. These should hopefully stay up if you're playing on the Series X, but if your only system is the 360, grab them sooner than later. I so hope I get this video out before the store shuts down. I've been working on it for a very long time. So with that out of the way, what kind of game is this? It's an anime-style action game which is incredibly over the top. You play as Azura, and he's just angry. You fight enemies larger than planets, and you're just a speck punching the tip of their finger. That kind of madness. At points it feels like more of a movie than a game, as it utilises a lot of quick-time events. It's not a game for everyone, but the sheer insanity kept me entertained with this one. If you're into your games like God of War, this will probably be right up your street. It's currently £30 in CEX here in the UK, with eBay again being a much pricier avenue. Splatterhouse is a game that people didn't really think was going to get a reboot, but when it did, the reception was definitely mixed. It plays like your usual 3D beat 'em up, but luckily they kept the gore intact from the older games. I actually found this game way harder than I was expecting, but then again, it's a genre I'm not overly good at, so I haven't finished it. I will go back to it though, one day. As an added bonus, it contains emulated versions of the older games, so it works as a sort of HD collection, but these need to be unlocked, they aren't available from the get-go. As I said, I do need to go back to this one and give it a fairer shot, as I've heard about people enjoying it, but it just felt like a cheaper release to me. It had that old get caught in a room and you have to kill everything to progress feel to it. The CEX value of roughly £40 matches eBay for once. This one isn't backwards compatible either, and it's been physical only for a long time, so I can't see the store closure affecting the price too much. But don't listen to me on that, I know I'll be wrong. Finally, for this section we have Painkiller Hell and Damnation. This is a first-person shooter that most people didn't even realise came out. The physical only came out as a bigger box collector's edition. The reason this might have been somewhat missed is due to the fact that the release had to be toned down from its original PC counterpart, as apparently German censors weren't happy with its original state, and it affected the physical release on the 360 and the PS3 everywhere. It also only received middling reviews, and standard level-by-level shooters seemed to be winding down in favour of more open-world games at the time of its release. It would most likely fit into the genre of boomer shooter these days, and I enjoyed what I've played of it. My biggest gripe was just a little too dark, so I had to turn the brightness up, but this could just be my awful eyesight too. Again, this one sits around the £25 to £45 range. The lower end of that, again being our friends over at CEX, but if you take a punt on this from there, it doesn't mean you will get all the correct outer packaging, but it's worth a go at that price point. Anyway, now let's move on to the next tier of the iceberg. Yeah, it still continues. In this section, we're going to talk about some of the region exclusives for the console. This won't just be a PAL/NTSC debate, as within these areas there are countries which have their own games, which makes this rabbit hole of Xbox 360 collecting so much more fun. Strangely, just because games are from certain regions, it doesn't mean the game itself is region locked. The 360 itself technically isn't region locked. Microsoft left it up to the developers themselves whether they wanted to region lock their games at a software level. If you ever want to see me do a video of testing some of these obscurities to see which regions they work on, I'm more than happy to do it. I have a console from each region in my gaming setup, and a lot of games to test. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into it. Earlier on I mentioned that sports games could get even pricier than FIFA 19, and here we are. The NCAA games are college sports games from America. These include the likes of basketball and American football. These sports are not something I'm too keen on myself, but I have sat down with mates and watched things like the Super Bowl from time to time. That's more of a reason to drink with friends rather than watch the event. But that's big teams. I'm even more confused around the culture of college sport being a big thing in the US, and even more so why there'll be games released about it. It's not like we're going to make games of amateur football or soccer teams over here, are we? This football-soccer thing is going to get confusing in this section. But yeah, these college games exist. There are quite a few of these available. They are, I'm going to be saying NCAA a lot here, so sorry. NCAA Basketball 09, NCAA Basketball 10, NCAA Football 07, NCAA Football 08, NCAA Football 09, NCAA Football 10, NCAA Football 11, NCAA Football 12, NCAA Football 13, NCAA Football 14, yep, there's a theme here, isn't there? NCAA March Madness 07, NCAA March Madness 08. Again, the prices of these are all over the place, ranging from $5 up to the bad boy of the bunch, NCAA 14, which quite often sells for around the $100 mark and up. I'm going to be talking about these prices as close as they are in the countries available, as importing them to UK will add a ton of fees, so expect to pay more if you're importing anything to where you live. These are games I've never played myself, but one day I'll have to get them into the collection. I'm just hoping that I run into them over here, that way I'd save a few pennies on import. Let's crack on with a PAL exclusive that not many people even in the PAL regions ever talk about. Grey Matter is an old school point and click adventure game with obtuse puzzles, a lot which revolve around sleight of hand as your main character Samantha is a street magician. This to me plays a lot like later 3D Broken Sword games. I actually had a good amount of fun with this one, but it's a genre I enjoy, although I will have to admit I had to check a walkthrough for some of the solutions, as they did get pretty complex. The story centres around paranormal events and magic in general. It's a bit of a weird one. I don't know why this didn't get a release outside of Europe on the Xbox 360, but it did come to the US as a PC release. If this is a genre you enjoy, I'd recommend it. It seems only fitting the next games we talk about is the plethora of 2D shooters released on the console in Japan, but I will add that there are a few shooters that got a US and a Japanese release that didn't make it to Europe, such as Raiden Aces, Raiden 4 and Otomedius Excellent. Why these never made it to other English-speaking countries, since they are already translated, is beyond me. I have played Otomedius Excellent though. It's a pretty average horizontal shooter, so maybe that's the reason it stayed there. It may have just sold poorly. As for the Raiden games, could be Raiden, I never know how it's pronounced. They're well regarded, and have been getting new releases and ports worldwide, so that one is a mystery. When it comes to Japan though, there are way too many to talk about here. But we'll talk about a couple of the standouts. I'm happy to put together a video detailing all of them down the line if anyone's interested. First up is Death Smiles 2. In Japan, they got a sequel to the game that we got here in Europe. This has since been released on a double pack on other systems in all regions, so there's no need to miss out on playing this one. It's really just one for achievement hunters and set completionists at this point. Now another series that only saw one release outside of Japan, but had 4 entries over there. This is the Dodonpachi series. I apologise now for how I'm going to pronounce all the stuff in this, but let's have a go at it. These are the 4 Dodonpachi games. Dodonpachi Dai Fukatsu version 1.5, Dodonpachi Dai Fukatsu Black Label, Dodonpachi Daiojo Black Label, Dodonpachi Sai Daiojo. Yeah, I must have got them wrong. I don't want to pretend to know the differences between these games without first-hand experience. I know that Fukahatsu version 1.5 is the name of Resurrection in Japan though, but the Black Label versions are usually the games that come with extra content and tweaks to the gameplay. I have a feeling we might have got some of the black stuff as DLC in the UK, or it's on the disc, I don't know. I can't remember, it's been a while since I played it. Saidai I think is the only standalone game, and it's the 7th in the series. To be honest, my knowledge is lacking as my pockets have never been deep enough to import them all. Strangely, when it comes to the Japanese shooters, the Dodonpachi series is one of the cheaper ones to get from Japan, but that means relatively cheaper. These games range from £50 to £100 here in the UK, but they are usually readily available. You used to be able to get these direct from Japan for much cheaper, but they soon cottoned on to collectors outside actually wanting them, and the prices have rose to match everywhere else. Again, they are still cheap for what some of the shooters on the system go for. There are some such as Sakura Flamingo Archives, which hits between £300 and £500. Since I don't have much knowledge or playtime of many of these games, and the ones I have played will be a lot of me just repeating myself, here's a list of what I believe to be all the shooters available. Don't worry, I'm not going to read them out, I'll flash them up on screen. As I said earlier, I would love to take a deep dive into all of them, and I'm happy to attempt it for a video down the line. Japan here again, and this is definitely a subset of their releases only for achievement hunters, set completionists, and people who can speak Japanese. If you've never played a visual novel, I'll explain what they are, and that's pretty much just an interactive book. Sometimes it's just reading as the story unfolds, and other times there might be some options to choose to create different branching paths. So if you play something like this that's entirely in Japanese and cannot read the language, there isn't much fun to be had. For achievement hunters though, these are usually pretty easy completions, as people have set up guides telling you what you need to do and what to select and when. The ones I've played have been for achievement reasons. Luckily this is a genre that's starting to take off a little bit in the English speaking countries, and some of them were even translated and came out on other systems. The Vita in particular got games such as Steins Gate translated. Much easier to play than the 360 Japanese version. To be honest, the story of it's pretty interesting. Really enjoyed it. Again, I'll pop up a list of some of the ones available if you're interested. Feel free to pause and look them up. Most of these don't have the price boom the shooters do, as they're less accessible, but still expect to pay around £15 to £50 for most of them. This is a strange set of games to only be released in the United States. My guess is the only reasons they could have stayed there is music with licensing issues or just poor sales, but here are a few games that the fans of Guitar Hero might be interested in. First up is Power Gig Rise of the Sixth String. It went down the band in a box route with guitar, drums and vocals. The guitar itself had actual strings, but whenever I've played it, it just feels like a janky version of Guitar Hero. But this might not be the fault of the game itself. Xbox updated their dashboard to the 2.0.12611.0 version. That was a mouthful. And this came with some issues for the instruments. They now just show up as generic Guitar Hero instruments, locking out some of the features of the game. The main one being the guitar, which had a power chord mode that added another level of depth to the gameplay, but I've never been able to give it a go. This in turn stops some of the achievements working, as it's unable to tell which guitar you're playing with. One of my holy grails is to track down a US console with a low firmware, just so I can unlock some of these rare achievements in the game. The drum kit peripheral was also a bit weird. It's called an air strike. You would place it on the floor and strike the air above it. I sadly do not have one of these yet, but I cannot see this working too well, or at all after the update. Luckily, Power Gig can be played with any Guitar Hero or Rock Band controllers, so if you just want to grab the game, it will cost you around £20. If you want all the instruments that you can't really use to their full capabilities, you'll be looking at a couple £100 here in the UK. Up next is Rock of the Dead. This is what you would get if Guitar Hero and House of the Dead had a baby. Basically it's a rail shooter, but you have to use a plastic guitar instrument to play the chords or notes on screen to kill the zombies. This is one I have and I've played all the way through it, as you can use any Guitar Hero controller, and it didn't have its own instrument. This one might have had some licensing issues, or something that kept it in the States. It does proudly say it contains music from Rob Zombie, so maybe this has something to do with it. As a game, it's alright. I like to think I'm pretty good at Guitar Hero, but the way this is laid out, I sometimes couldn't get my head around it. This one will only run you about £30 in the UK, but sadly, I know this one's definitely region locked. Lastly, this is the one I was the most upset never got a release over here. I followed the development of this game closely, and then forgot about it when it never arrived. I have since got a copy and confirm it's pretty solid. That game is Bandfuse Rock Legends. This was developed around the time of Rocksmith, and it was touted as being a learning tool as well as a game. This one's actually pretty deep for a gamified learning tool. It uses tablature as a way to read and play along with the songs, so it does take a bit of getting used to, especially if you've come over from something like Rocksmith, which has a more Guitar Hero looking approach to playing along. But if you're a musician, this must be a godsend. Of course it needs an instrument to play, and this is no plastic affair. You will have to supply a real guitar or bass. Strangely, this game had some work done on it by Harmonix. You know, the Rock Band people. It even uses some of the same graphical interface from their game. You would have thought because of this they would have pushed for a more worldwide release, but sadly not. If this is one that piques your interest, a complete copy with all the required cables will set you back a whopping 200-ish after importing it to the UK. There are plenty of sellers listing the game for about $15 online, but that isn't going to cut it, as without the cables you're not getting anywhere. I've never checked to see if it's compatible with a Rocksmith Realtone cable, but I can't see it working. Let's pop down under to Australia this time, as they have the exclusive AFL Live games. These are Aussie Rules football games. I have no idea what Aussie Rules football is, but I know there are two main games, AFL Live and AFL Live 2. Strangely, the first in the pair also has a Game of the Year variant with extra content. I'm still looking for one of these, but they're readily available on eBay and don't usually sell for more than £10, but you'll be paying more than that on shipping and import. I do have the standard first AFL game, but I've never played it. Let's mix it up a little. Let's not talk about games that came out only in one place, but let's talk about versions of games that only came out in one place. These were usually complete editions of games, where the DLC was on the disc. The next two versions of these games only came out in the US and nowhere else. Up first is the Marvel Ultimate Alliance Gold Edition. If you haven't played Marvel Ultimate Alliance, It's a top-down Diablo-style dungeon crawler set in the Marvel universe with tons of playable characters. As you can tell from that description, it was also perfect for downloadable characters to be added later on after the release. This is great. What could go wrong? Well, being a licensed property, the license ran out and the DLC was pulled from store. But before this, they released a version of the game with all the DLC characters on the disc and called it the Gold Edition. Sadly though, it only released in the States. Unfortunately, these DLC characters also had achievements tied to them, locking out a large portion of the players around the world from completing the game 100%. But with this disc, it's still possible. This caused the value of the game to shoot up overnight, and it's now costing about £150 to get one in the UK. There is a silver lining though. The game is actually region free, so if you can track it down, it will work on a PAL system. Never tried it on a Japanese one though. In a similar turn of events, the game Naughty Bear also had a Gold Edition released in the States, which contains the DLC for the game, which was removed from the store. And again, this is region free, so it will work on a PAL system. There again are achievements tied to the DLC episodes, but this is where the game falls flat. The achievements for the DLC in this game are bugged, and even if you do play the episodes, they don't unlock. So it's not one for achievement hunters, but if you ever want to know what the lost content is actually like, it is available to play. But don't expect to be unlocking any achievements, and it will cost you around about £40 now. Back to Europe for this next exclusive, which used to be touted online as one of the rarest games on the console, and only 2,000 copies were rumoured to exist. If that's true, at least 3 of them have been through my hands. I think it was just scaremongering online to make it sound more rare than it was. What game is it? It's My Horse and Me Too. It's just a horse riding / care game made for young girls. It mainly got noticed in the collecting scene as it was an easy 1000G back in the day. It did have 2 noticeable releases though. The green box was the UK release and the pink one was a German release, I think. This is just what I've known them as, but I imagine the different colours probably popped up in other EU countries. I used to own both the green and the pink variants, but I sold the pink one when I needed some funds. Regret it to this day. For what this game is, it's not a cheap one, but the price fluctuates all the time. The cheapest place to pick this up in the UK again is CEX, coming in at only £60, at the time of writing of course. Although this has hit triple figures many times on eBay. Just don't believe the scarcity rumours. This one's pretty easy to get hold of, if you've got the money. This is going to cover 2 very niche games by the Spanish video game company Freedom Factory. These both have releases in mainland Europe, and from what I see, only really around the Spanish region, and strangely one source is saying they came out in Australia, but I can't find any pictorial proof of that. Anyway, up first is Bloodbath. This is a strange online arena-based brawler. The gameplay has a few different modes, but it usually just boils down to killing the other team while attacking or defending points. It's incredibly bare bones, but I've never had the pleasure of playing it online with anyone else, as you'll never find anyone playing this at the same time. Same as the game Snipers, but we're not going to talk about that one today. Gotta keep some back if I do a part 2, don't I? Even though I haven't played this online with anyone, I have got the 1000G in it. Luckily you can launch games with bots and no other players, meaning you can sit there and grind out this mindless piece of crap for about 12 hours and obtain all the achievements. It's also a bit of a buggy mess and likes to wipe your save progress for no reason. I wouldn't advise anyone play this, but if you want it for your collection it's going to set you back somewhere between £30 and £50 these days. The second game I doubt anyone could see coming. This small Spanish developer somehow got the license for the movie Kick-Ass 2. How? I don't know. What did they do with it? They slapped out a game that lasts a few hours and is the epitome of movie tie-in crap. Earlier I complained about being walled into areas on Splatterhouse. This game is the complete opposite. You can run past almost everything and just sprint the levels. If you do engage in combat, it's the only game I've ever played where it feels like nothing connects. There's no weight or any real sound effects to hit, and damn is this an ugly game as well. Even with all this though, I would encourage people to play this out of morbid curiosity. It's 100 times better than Bloodbath, and a complete copy on eBay will only set you back about £30. Go on, you know you want to try it. Curiosity killed the cat though, didn't it? Sometimes a game will get a release on multiple systems here in the UK, then randomly just decide to skip one. This is what happened in the case of Barbie and her sister's Puppy Rescue. Here we got it on both the Wii U and the PS3, but for some reason the Xbox 360 version remained a US exclusive. This is one I've played and got the 1000G out of. I even decided to stream it over on Twitch so others could feel my pain. It's basically an open world game where you ride about on a bike picking up puppies to trigger minigames. Completing one of these means you can take the puppy back with you, wash and groom it, then pop it on the internet to be adopted. Rinse and repeat. Nowhere near the worst game on this list, but why it never came out here is a mystery. I guess they just thought girls don't buy Xboxes, only the Wii U? No one bought the Wii U. A copy of this though will run you about £50 after import. Here's another one that got a UK release on the PS3 but not the 360. And I only want to talk about it because I had way more fun with it than I thought I would. It's just a skidoo or snowmobile, as we would call it, racing game. I was impressed by the way the snowmobile handled and just thought it was a bit of fun. It's not a deep game on any level and it's a very easy 1000G, but I just never hear anyone talk about it. Again, you're looking about £30 to £40 after import for this one. It might not be worth that much, but I'd happily play it again. Here are two that I'm not sure what's going to happen to after the 360 store closes. These are the Konami Classics collections, volumes 1 and 2. These are compilations of games released on Xbox Live Arcade. Luckily, most of these games are backwards compatible, bar 2. Both of these are located on volume 2. These being Russian Attack and Track and Field. Contra, the third game on the disc, is, but if you want to own it physically, this is the only way to do it, and only in the US. Volume 1 is again a US exclusive, but all the games are backwards compatible. They are Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Frogger, and Super Contra. I can only find these available in the States at time of writing, and Volume 1 will set you back about $35, where Volume 2 can hit up to about $60. I blame the inclusion of Castlevania for that one. For our penultimate section of this tier, we will swing back to Europe for more obscure sports games. Here we have IHF Handball 14 and Handball 16. I have no idea how handball is played, nor have I ever seen it being played. I do own both of these games though, so I'm going to have to give them a shot, as my curiosity is piqued. Luckily here in the UK, both of these are pretty cheap. 14 will run you around about £5 on CEX, while 16 is sitting around the £15 mark. I will note though that these usually come with non-English covers. If you want an English language variant and head to eBay, expect to pay a lot more. Specifically 16, I've seen that go for around £75 just for some English text. And don't talk to me about how hard this is to track down for the PS Vita. Why do I want a second copy of this game? The last one today for this section is another one that people may have missed. As everyone knows, Resident Evil is called Biohazard in Japan. You can blame Biohazard the band for why the name has changed, even though I think Resident Evil suits it better. Well, for the first game at least. For an interesting fact, this is why Resident Evil 7 has the subtitle of Biohazard, and in Japan it's called Biohazard 7, with the subtitle of Resident Evil. Anyway, back to the Revival selection. This is a 2-disc set containing the HD remasters of both Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil Code Veronica, which were released on Xbox Live Arcade. This is one I never really hear anyone talk about or show off. Might explain why it's still £40. I'm not sure if these play in Japanese, but I imagine they do. It's been one I've wanted to pick up for a long time. I just haven't pulled the trigger yet. The next tier of this iceberg is going to be something a bit different. It's mainly a bit of an information dump for people who are into achievements or different variants of games, but hopefully it's still interesting. This is going to be a very short layer of the iceberg, but it makes sense for it to be mentioned, and if you're collecting these, you're pretty deep into the journey. This relates to the Xbox achievement system. As you should know, each game comes with a base 1000 gamer score to unlock. Sadly, this can only be done once per account, per game, but this is where achievement stacking comes into play. With some games, multiple versions from different regions can count as a new game played, and it will allow you to unlock that sweet gamer score all over again. In different regions, most of the games have the same name, but things such as Sonic's Genesis Collection is the same as Sega Mega Drive Ultimate Collection, but allows you to unlock the achievements all over again. So here is a list of the games that you can do more than once, if you have the means to play them from other regions. Sometimes multiple regions class as one game, but I'll try to make sense of this as easy as I can. The following list will show the name of the game and the regions that you can stack it with. If they're within the same bracket, they're classed as the same game. Different brackets classed as a different game. I hope that makes sense anyway. Just for clarity, brackets are what the English call parentheses. Sorry for such an information dump. This is not an extensive list, but it's a quick rundown of the ones that I knew about and I could quickly double check online. Hopefully some of your favourite games are on there and you can do them all over again. Now away from the long lists, and back to talking about some actual games. At last we've made it to the final tier. I'll be impressed if anyone's actually made it this far. I've been working on this for a very long time, so I'll be happy if at least one person hears this. As the stacks whizzed past, you may have noticed a few strange ones on there. I just wanted to highlight one to show how bizarre the world of Xbox stacks can get. I'm of course talking about the Korean version of Wall-E. I mention this as it very rarely pops up online for sale, but as I write there is one currently listed for just over £400. I think the notoriety of this one mainly comes down to the fact it will indeed play on a UK system, and back in the day it was almost impossible to track down. I'm going to have to say I wouldn't ever drop this much on a copy of Wall-E. I've played the UK version and I couldn't be bothered to finish it, so this is one for the hardcorest of hardcore achievement hunters, or just people with way too much disposable income. I feel I need to include an obscure game from every part of the globe here. This one isn't pricey, but more just confusing as to why it exists. Obut Petanque, I think that's how it's pronounced. Well, it's the second game in the series. It's basically a bowls game, and it hails from mainland Europe. I'm pretty sure it's French. For the longest time this game was impossible to track down, and when it did pop up, it was silly money here in the UK. Then apparently somebody found a pallet load of them and realised collectors in other countries were looking for them, and flooded Amazon with copies. Either way, it's now a pretty cheap game, and it will only run you about £30. I have heard though, in its country of origin, it's still pretty damn cheap. No, I have not played it, it's still sealed. A Connect bowls game, that's not for me. It might be cheap, but I put it this far down simply because I don't know who this is aimed at. The first game's on the PS3 if you're interested. I have it, but I've never played that either. Come to think of it, how the fuck did it get a sequel? Up next is Final Fantasy Seekers of Adulin. Alduin? There's going to be a theme in this section of me not knowing how to pronounce things. If any Americans watch this, you might find it strange that this is so far down the list. This game isn't too hard to find on your shores, but here in the UK this thing is like rocking horse shit. It was released towards the end of an online only game, and it's just an expansion pass for it. Even worse, it's an expansion pass for a game that you cannot play anymore, so most shops won't stock it. It rarely shows up on eBay in the UK, and when it does, you're looking at over £100. This is just going from memory too. There isn't currently any on eBay, or any that have sold recently to check against. All the other add-ons for this game are pretty easy to track down, so I don't actually know what caused this one to fly under the radar. I've never seen it in the store even when the game was relevant. Maybe it was sold online only. I have no idea. It's a mystery to me. Luckily, a kind soul on Instagram sold me this pretty cheap, otherwise I'd still be looking for it to this day. Here is one that many people have as their Xbox 360 holy grail. El Chavo Kart is a racing game based on the El Chavo Animado, or El Chavo Animated series as it would be called in English. Again, it's a mouthful, I don't speak other languages. This game did technically get a worldwide release, but that's a bit misleading. These were mobile versions for Android and iOS. The physical console versions I believe to have been a Mexican exclusive, but trickled into the US due to its location. This is one that I do own, and it's not too bad. It's just a simple kart racer, most likely on par with the likes of the DreamWorks kart games. It has a few quirks though that if you don't win all the races before moving on, you'll be locked out of achievements. From memory, you also have to be playing on the highest difficulty, but from what I've played, it wasn't too difficult. Not much more to say about it other than yeah, it's another curio from the library. But how much will a copy of this set you back? When I picked it up years ago, I got a good deal on it for about £50. But today you could probably put a 1 in front of that, and it'll cost you roughly about £150 after import. My issue was trying to find somebody who'd actually post it to the UK. This is one I can see getting very pricey in the years going on though. Sadly, it's also region locked, but yet again it did also have a PS3 release, which is region free if you don't have the means of playing a 360 copy. This one confused me for a long time. If you look up Combat Wings Great Battles of World War II everywhere, it will tell you it got a worldwide release. Even What Culture Gaming put out a video of the most expensive and rare Xbox 360 games and gave this the thumbnail image. In said thumbnail and video, they made bold claims that the game is so rare that copies which have gone on sale have hit $10,000. This was for the American copy. But I was convinced this had a Japanese-only physical release, and all other regions were digital. So I did what any sane person would have done. I hounded the developer, CI Games, for an answer, and they confirmed to me the only physical of the game was ever released was the Japanese one. I would love to know where the information about the $10,000 came from, or if it was just a prototype or something. But we've heard it direct from the horse's mouth that a PAL or standard NTSC copy does not exist. So after all that, how much will a Japanese copy of this game cost you? Usually there's a handful on eBay, but only one sale that's happened recently at time of recording. Going by this, to get a copy in the UK you're looking at about £150. That's definitely a long way off that 10k number that's touted online. This is one I've been tempted to add to the collection for some time. but every time I go to pull the trigger, something more interesting pops up. I'll grab it at some point. NBA Elite 11 might be the holy grail of Xbox 360 and PS3 collecting. It was finished and delivered to stores, only to be pulled just before sale. This was due to the incredibly bad feedback they got from playtesters and the demo they put out. Any which had been delivered to stores were to be sent back and the game was shelved forever. However, a couple of games did slip out into the public. I would like to go out and say that they're most likely review copies though, as you only ever see the disc only being sold, never the artwork. The PS3 copy is known to be real, and it'd be sensible to believe the pictures for the Xbox One could exist. But the website True Achievements doesn't have any tracking data for it, but it does on their sister site True Trophies for the PS3 copy. Since this never got a release, people don't usually class it as part of the full set for either system. But if you were to pick this up, how much would a copy of it set you back? The answer is I don't know. I cannot find any data on the 360 copy, so maybe it doesn't exist. But if we use the PS3 copy as an estimate, online sales are looking about £2,700 for a complete copy. This is going by price charting. Again, I still haven't seen the sale of a complete one. It's always disc only, so I would take this with a pinch of salt. But a massive price tag for something so rare doesn't seem outside the realm of possibility. When the disc only does sell, it always goes well into the four figures. I would love to see if somebody actually does have a 360 copy of this. And with that, that is the end of the iceberg. I know I didn't end it with some of the most expensive stuff. Well, maybe the most expensive, but a lot of the Japanese shooters are very expensive, but that's just a given and most people know about them. I wanted to cover the ones that you might not have heard of, but as I said, I could do another one of these lists. I imagine other people would have put this in a different order, but this is based on my own personal journey, aiming for a full worldwide set of Xbox 360 games. I've been collecting these since day one, but I've fallen off of it in recent years as more retro consoles have taken over. But I feel after making this I've slightly reignited my passion for collecting for the 360, and I'm going to have to make more of a push to at least get the power set complete in the near future. Especially with the incoming price rises, god. As I said multiple times, this isn't a complete list. There are so many more games to talk about, so I'd be happy to do another one of these if anyone finds it interesting. Maybe not as long, but it could be top-ups for different tiers, like talking about more of the super obscure stuff. Anyway, let me know what you thought of the video. Did I highlight any games you didn't know existed? Was it way too long? I know the answer to that is yes, but you never know. Some people like a long video. Anyway, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, you know, all that good stuff. I'm going to bugger off now. Have fun. Bye.